Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. As you guys can tell by the title of this video, we are going to be talking about books that I love or have recently come to love. I don't have to be the person to say, we're in quarantine, we're spending so much time indoors. Like, y'all already know that. But something I did pick up during quarantine has been reading. I've never been an avid reader. The books I have purchased have mostly been in the self-help genre, but otherwise any books that I've come to like over the years have usually been through compulsory reading in school. But if you watched my how I spent my time off in August vlog, which is linked on the screen as well as down below, then you know that I joined a book club. I actually joined this book club back in July. One of my friends and her friend created it in response to the resurgence of the BLM movement, to start reading more literary works by Black authors that detailed the experience of being a Black person and things like that. And she asked me to be a part of it, and it has been such an awesome book club. We are still going strong. We are finishing our third book this Sunday, and it really inspired me to create this video. So all that to say, I love my book club. You should join one or start one, or just start reading and get back into that as a hobby, get a break from some screen time, and just curl up with a good book. But let's get into why you're here, which is to talk about the books that I love. I have 7 books here. It's kind of heavy, so I'm gonna put it down, but these are in no particular order. These are just the ones I'm going to share today. It's 7 of them, so let's get started because y'all know I like to talk. This first book is called Tuesdays with Mori by Mitch Albom. This is an autobiographical, well, it's not an autobiographical. This is a non-fiction book about the author, Mitch Albom, who reconnects with his college professor, Mori Schwartz. And when he reconnects with him, he finds out, well, Mori finds out that he has been diagnosed with ALS and he's basically writing a memoir for him in his last days. And this book, Mitch Albom is known for his book, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, but Tuesdays with Mori was actually written before that book came out. And this book makes me cry like a baby. I mean, I am a crybaby as it is. Like, I'm such an emotional person, but this book really, really makes me cry like so hard. It's so beautifully written, but the theme throughout all these books that I'm going to share with you guys is that all the writers, or at least these works, really make you feel like you're there, like you're experiencing with them. Mitch is meeting with Mori every Tuesday to learn life lessons, to write down reflections, for Mori to just look back on his life, because, I mean, if you're given a diagnosis of a disease that's going to take your life, I mean, I feel like that's what you would do. And it is so, you become so connected to the both of them and seeing their relationship. And of course, as Mori starts to, I hate to use the word deteriorate, but that's essentially what happens with your body. As that happens, he becomes more than just this guy that's transposing a memoir for him. It's more than just a student connecting with his college professor. He starts to be there for him in a physical way. I mean, he helps sit him up, he helps feed him. It's all these things, like their connection, their bond just gets so strong, and it's so beautiful to read. You really just, your heart just grows as you read this book, and I absolutely love it. The next book is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Anyone who knows Sylvia Plath, you know she's a tragic figure, and The Bell Jar is one of those books that I chose during 11th grade English, and I didn't know what it was going to be about, but it said something about some girl going to New York City, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll read that. This book has stuck with me basically up until like a year ago. I have felt weirdly in tune with the main character, despite the fact that this is set in the 50s and this is a young white girl. But this book is about a young girl who wants to be a poet, and she gets a month-long internship at a magazine in New York City. And basically a lot happens in this month, like between being pulled to be a certain type of girl in the 50s, all the other girls are really concerned with makeup and beauty and boys and fashion and, like, you know, things that we consider in society superficial, even though they may mean different things for different people. But remember, this is the 50s, so you know what type of girl I'm talking about. she's fighting that need to conform to that and the kind of girl she really is. And while this is happening, she basically unravels that she is not mentally stable, and they end up sending her to a ward and she has to see a doctor and they put her on pills and like all this stuff happens. Mind you, again, this is a month-long internship that she's in the city. So you're probably wondering, like, Alexa, why would you feel like you identify with this character? For some reason in 11th grade, this really drew me in. I think it was the drama of it all, and also this fear that I think we all feel to conform, and how there's a constant struggle within between what you want to be or what you think you want to be and who you really are. And I was feeling that a little bit in 11th grade, because you're in high school, everyone feels that. But the reason this book stuck with me is because I did go on to move to a city that highly values things in our society that like can make or break your career, can make or break your social circle. I mean, that's what LA is. And I dealt with that a lot, just like constantly at conflict with, should I act a certain way? Should I dress a certain way? Should I try to look a certain way? Versus who I really was, and going through that finding myself thing that we all do when we're in college, and then eventually having a nervous breakdown and having to go to counseling. You know, I didn't have to go to a psych ward, but you know, it goes to show that regardless of like your background and everything, people have similar struggles that can be compartmentalized into the same thing. And The Bell Jar is a really great way of detailing that, but it's such a whirlwind. I mean, especially knowing in real life that Sylvia Plath takes her own life at 30. So she was going through her 20s in the 50s. That I couldn't imagine. I really couldn't if you were someone who thought the way that she thought during that time. So it's like a really tragic novel in that way, but it's really good. I mean, if I read it at 17 and could read it all the way up till I was 25, I think it's good. Y'all should read it. This next book was our second read in the book club, and guys, this book, I know you guys have seen this book if you watch other YouTubers. I know you guys have seen this book circling around for, especially during the months of June and beginning of July, when people were responding to BLM and trying to pick up more works. This book, there's a reason it was so popular. It's a short book. Y'all could see this. It's a short book, but it is one of the most beautifully written books, if not the most beautifully written book I've ever read in my life. It does such a great way of detailing his experiences, making it relatable and making it so emotionally driven. Like, for those who don't know what this book is about, it's by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. And he writes about his life as a Black man, and it is addressed to his son, who was 15 years old at the time this book is being written. And just basically writing his autobiography, but in a way that lets him know, you're going to have so many experiences. You're going to have even more opportunities than I had myself. And there will be people who will treat you a certain way because of the color of your skin. It doesn't matter what year you're in, how old you are. There will be people that unfortunately cannot see beyond that, and you may or may not have certain experiences because of it. The author, he grew up in the 90s. When I say grew up in the 90s, I mean like high school in the 90s, went to college in the early 2000s, and he takes you on this tale from growing up in the streets of Baltimore to going on to an HBCU in DC, Howard University, what he calls the Mecca. Then he goes on to move to New York City, and like later goes to Europe. And when you hear this, as I'm telling you, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, he did so much. And he did, but he had so many experiences as a young Black boy that really put almost blinders on him with certain experiences, that I feel he talks about the struggle to like enjoy certain things because of certain experiences he had in his youth. But he does it so well. Like, I don't know how to describe it to you guys. You just have to read it. It's so beautifully written. That's the only thing I can use to describe it. It's just all of us, every time we came together to discuss the next chapters, we'd always be like, oh my gosh, like, he wrote this so beautifully. It was like heartbreaking, but hopeful. And like, there were times I would read this and actually physically like hold on to my heart. It just, you gotta read it. If I haven't already said it with the last two books, this is a no-brainer. I don't really care. People are like, oh, it's about race. Yes, it's about race and you should read it. You should. Buy this. Support Black authors. Anyway, this next book is actually the first book we used in the book club to kind of indoctrinate us, I guess. And I think this book is really, really special. This is another book that you guys will have seen floating around on the internet. I mean, it was like out of stock, back ordered everywhere, because this book is more than just an autobiography. So you want to talk about Race by Ijeoma Oluo? She does such a great job in this book of talking about real life experiences, her own as a biracial Black woman, and her children and friends, and different stages of her life. But she has statistics. She includes other marginalized communities, and she prompts you. The best thing about this book, and the reason why it's a New York Times bestseller and why it became so popular right after the resurgence of the BLM movement at the beginning of the summer, was because it is great for group discussion. No matter who the discussion is with, this book is really great for that, because it prompts you, not specifically like, your exercise at the end of this chapter is to do this. She just asks really good questions that make you think, and questions that you can bring to your group discussion, whatever that may be, whether it is a personal book club or it's sensitivity training in the corporate office, which I know a lot of that took place back in June and early July. And this, I don't know if all editions of it have it, but this edition has discussion questions built in at the back. So that's also a great facilitator. Specifically for anyone who's watching this that may be Black, you're probably like, well, why do I need to read a book like that if it's coming from the perspective of a Black woman sharing experiences we have as Black people? I walked into it that same way. I was like, well, I'm probably just gonna read a bunch of stuff that I already like know, have experienced, understand. The chapter on hair made me cry, like, you know. But there is a specific chapter in here about privilege. I've written a blog post about how my frame of mind has changed since reading that. It's linked down below if you guys want to check it out. But she has a great way of explaining that no matter where we are in society, even as a Black woman, I still have certain privileges over people that may even be part of my community. I have my privileges of being neurotypical, being in my 20s, being able-bodied, being in a certain social class, and so on and so forth. But I think that that is such a great chapter specifically so that we kind of take ourselves out of the lens for a minute and just see, what are the things I have an advantage in at life? I use advantage in air quotes because it really is all about perspective, but how can I leverage the opportunities that I may have over another person to make it easier for other people? And yeah, this book is really, really great. I have so many earmarks across this whole book. It has really been a great way to break our book club open, and I think it has facilitated such great conversation, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to read it themselves, wants to kickstart a little group that talks about race. So definitely go support a Black female author. And on to the next one. This is probably not a shock, like, it's Michelle Obama. I mean, need I say more? But I will say more, just a little bit. I love this book. It's a hefty one. It's definitely a coffee table book. And besides the fact that I just always have admired and looked up to Michelle Obama, I think anyone can read this book regardless of your political beliefs. It is an autobiography. It is chronological. So of course you're gonna hit a point in the book where she does talk about being First Lady of the United States. So if that's not your jam, like, whatever. But if you just want to read about who she is as a person and where she comes from and her life story and her personal accomplishments, then you should read this. Of course, they did do a tiny segment of it, a little documentary on Netflix this past May. It was great. It's the tip of the iceberg for what's within this book, because in the documentary, of course, she is displaying things from the perspective of being interviewed, obviously being on her book tour and then people following her around. But overall, this book really gets into the details of everything. It was really cool to read about her telling her story as a young black girl on the south side of Chicago and the little social circle she ran in and how that's connected to her life now, and seeing her go from prestigious school to prestigious school to prestigious law firm, and her in her 20s and trying to figure out, oh my gosh, am I making the wrong mistake by staying in law? Like all the things that are so relatable. And for me, it just solidified why I look up to her, because the person that I saw on podiums and in photographs and in interviews and all that when she was First Lady of the United States, I always felt like she was so down to earth and relatable, and this book just reinforces it. She's a real woman. She is exactly what you see is what you get. She's always been like that, and she talks about that pivot, of course, going from this outspoken woman to having to sort of edit herself once she got on the campaign trail, but then also realizing I have a voice. That is my husband. We are a team. This is my family. I'm gonna do what I wanna do. And I think that that's super admirable. Again, regardless of your political beliefs, I think she's just really, really cool. And I really enjoyed reading Becoming. Second to last one, guys. Let me check this bookmark out. So this is the third book. As I said at the beginning of the video, my book club is coming to a close. No. My book club is finishing this book this Sunday, and I read it ahead so that I could get this video recorded for you guys. But this book is, I don't want this to come off awful because that's not the tone, but this book is haunting. It is also a really tiny book and it's called How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. And it is also an autobiography, and he writes about growing up as a young black gay man and his experiences. And this one hit really close to home because he grew up in Lewisville, Texas. That is a suburb here in Dallas. I've friends and family who live out there. He talks about places in Dallas that I personally frequent. His mom, she's a single mother. She is from and grew up in Memphis, and he spent his summers in Memphis. My mom is from Memphis, and that's where I spent my summers. So it's just, I really felt, again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, or when I got into this list, these authors do such a great job of making you feel like you're there with them, but Saeed is actually a poet. And this book, he makes you really feel like really feel like you are in the room with him. The room where it happened, this whole book is the room where it happened. This whole book is the room where it happened. If you get that reference, let me know down in the comments. But oh my goodness, like this book had me bawling my eyes out at the end. This is a book where we talk about this every week in the book club, that we are like white knuckling this book every time we read, because he writes in such a way that you feel like you're on this roller coaster. Like, I have used this reference so many times, but I truly, truly feel like I am the Mr. Krabs meme every time something happens in this book. Like, it says right here on the back, I'll just read it real quick. Haunted and haunting, Jones's memoir tells the story of a young black gay man from the South as he fights to carve out a place for himself within his family, within his country, within his own hopes, desires, and fears. That's all I need to say to you guys, because this book is not for the faint of heart. I will just put that out there. I will also say, like, if you are uncomfortable with reading about gay people or, you know, homophobic, I'll just say it. This is not a book you should read. Or maybe you should read it, actually. Maybe you should, and normalize that part of your brain. But it's, y'all, there's a reason that this man became a writer, that he became a poet, because this autobiography, it shook me. It really, really shook me. Every single chapter that I read, something happened that I would be like I don't know how to put it into other words. Y'all just have to read it. We are ending with my scripture, my Bible, my everything, More Than Enough by Elaine Welteroth. My idol. She's everything to me. This book came into my life at the end of 2018. A classmate of mine was in town and we were talking about how amazing Becoming was, and she asked me if I had heard of this book, and I hadn't, but the way she sold it to me, I was like, oh, that sounds interesting, I should read that. This book changed my life. Like, the day this book came into my life, it changed my life. It I don't even know where to start, guys. Like, first, if you don't know who Elaine Welteroth is, she was the youngest editor-in-chief of the Condé Nast publication of Teen Vogue. She was editor-in-chief at 29 years old. She's also the second Black editor-in-chief ever in Condé Nast history. You may recognize her as a judge from the last 2 seasons of Project Runway. Obviously, she's getting notoriety for this book as well. But she's a writer, and she's been so big in the magazine world, and this is also an autobiography. And guys, she literally writes it as if she's having a conversation with you, just like person to person. You should definitely follow her on Instagram. If you do follow Vogue, you probably saw her wedding during May, during quarantine. She had a stoop wedding in New York City. It was fabulous. She had, I don't even know if this was intentional, but she had a Carrie Bradshaw moment. She got married in a labelless white dress. Like, it was so beautiful, you guys. You have to go watch it. I'm gonna link it down below because you'll have to watch the video. You'll have to look at the pictures. You'll have to read the coverage on this wedding. I love her. I stand for her. Even if I wasn't so obsessed with her, it was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Anyway, this book, guys, she just writes about literally just her story, but like I said, she writes about it in a very conversational tone, just talking about how, like, she realized at a young age that she really always wanted to be a boss, always wanted to be in charge, and she talks about so many different themes in this book, being a biracial kid growing up in Northern California, and navigating that space, trying to figure out what she wanted to do, going to college. Men are a big part of this book, and her relationships. She talks about her career epiphanies and navigating the magazine world, advocating for yourself, advocating for your pay, for your title, going after opportunities, but also learning that you shouldn't kill yourself for a job, talking about corporate politics, politics in general, race of course, and pop culture references. Like, again, this is another author. I didn't mention it before, but Saeed Jones also wrote his book as a person who was in high school in the 90s and then went on to college in the 2000s. And I think he was later in the 2000s though, because he references Barack Obama becoming president. But this is the same thing. Like, she's in college during the mid 2000s because she makes a reference to The Hills. And because she works in the magazine world, because eventually that becomes Teen Vogue, of course she's referencing all the things that we know are going on in pop culture headlines. And I was in college when I think when we both all saw the tide change with Teen Vogue. We all saw the tide change with Teen Vogue, and we saw more cover stories about race and about politics and things like that, and that was when she was editor-in-chief. Like, basically when Yara Shahidi became a big deal and like Zendaya became Zendaya, like, that was when she was editor-in-chief. And so it's a lot of her talking about her experiences and navigating that and the mistakes she made even as an editor-in-chief, and her basically finding her breaking point. There's tea, y'all. There's tea in this book. She even talks about exchanges with Anna Wintour herself. Like, this book is just really interesting. Even if you're not someone who is all about like, I'm trying to find my career and professional purpose. If you just want some drama to read, this book is it, because it's, oh gosh, I just love Elaine. I really feel like she's like my big sister. And maybe that's why I kind of really enjoyed How We Fight for Our Lives and Between the World and Me and The Bell Jar, and of course More Than Enough, is just because I'm in my 20s. I'm at the end of my mid-20s, entering my late 20s phase, and even though you feel it all through your 20s, I'm at that stage where I'm fighting that internal voice that's telling me I should have my life together by now, and I should be perfect, and I should have this, and I should have that, regardless of the fact there are so many factors as a millennial that will prevent me from reaching certain dreams by a certain milestone. And then the other voice that's like, girl, relax, you're not supposed to have it figured out. The people who get these headline stories about being so successful in their 20s, that's why they get a headline story. It's not normal. You need to chill out. You're gonna figure it out. Your 20s are for making mistakes. And I'm gonna make a whole video, guys. I'm gonna make a whole video about the things they don't teach you in your 20s. Hold me to it. But I think that's why I really enjoy reading these books, because it feels relevant to me. It feels like something that's tangible, and each of these authors have experienced something that I have either identically experienced or something similar that I can pull from, and it really helps me relate to their story. But if you don't read anything else in this stack, you have to read this. You absolutely have to read More Than Enough by Elaine Welch Roth, and follow her on Instagram and watch Project Runway. But that brings me to the end of my list. I don't know if I said it at the beginning, but that list was in no particular way of like favorite to least favorite. Obviously not. Like, you guys saw I loved every single one of these books that I mentioned. Like, if you have any book recommendations, it does not have to be about any of the themes or tropes that I mentioned in these books. If you just have a good book that you want to recommend, please leave it down in the comments. The next book that my book club is reading is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I'm really excited because I've heard nothing but good things this whole summer. Another book that is really hard to get a hold of. But I'm really looking forward to reading it. So if you guys have any recommendations in any genre, please let me know down in the comments. And if you have read any of these books, also let me know down in the comments. Let me know what your favorite part was, because it won't be a spoiler for me. Actually, no, don't put that down in the comments because someone else may see your spoiler. DM me on Instagram. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, I hope you guys are making the most of your days inside, or maybe some days outside. Happy fall, and I'll catch you guys next week. Bye.